Hello, everyone. Welcome to part two on our series of Flyout. We're building our Failliner here because that's funny. In today's episode, of course, we're just going to keep rolling with everything we've done here. Like I said, you've seen everything more or less in real time to give you an idea of how quick you can work out a concept. At this point, all of our flight controls have been set. We're going to have to tweak them to death later. One of the problems I noticed right away, for example, is my center of gravity is right there. And my center of pressure, if you take a look very carefully, do not line with each other. They're actually not terrible, but it's going to be a big problem for us later. So that'll be fun when we have to deal with that. So first things first, I want to be dealing with my landing gear. And there's a lot of different philosophical ways we can attack the landing gear problem here. One thing, of course, we could do is we could run the landing gear all the way down from the wings. So we could run the landing gear out of the middle, which makes them kind of unstable is what I want to call it. So we have a bunch of different choices. Obviously, with this particular design being a high wing, a lot of times they put the landing gear in the bottom of the nacelle for like the turboprop, but we're not making a turboprop today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to opt for a body landing gears technique. And that's, I'm asking for trouble because unfortunately, the way this aircraft is set up now is we don't know where the final center of gravity is. So if we get the landing gear in the wrong spot, we end up having to move the landing gear. So like I usually tell people, worry about aesthetics kind of last, and you can always come back. So let's add some landing gear. So I'm going to go ahead and press my little plus down here at the bottom. I'm going to go up to a bunch of different things. I'm going to select landing gear. And of course, we want to shut off symmetry here because we're going to do the nose wheel first. Of course, if we're an airliner, the nose is going to come somewhere in here like that. I'm going to go ahead and click on it once, switch back to arrow tool here, select it. If you have trouble picking on it, one thing you do want to do is you just want to double check that you're at an X value of 0 if you actually want to center it. And then, of course, you can fiddle with all the other settings here like that. So my brain always says, how big is the landing gear got to be in order to be good? And of course, I'm looking at this thing. It's a little tiny. It's like a little F-18 wheel here. So we want to give it a little bit more capability here, basically. And one thing that we do want to do is you can retract preview and actually see what it looks like when it retracts. And you can see very clearly that it does not retract completely into the fuselage. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drag this up a little bit, and then I'm going to shut off a retraction preview there. We're going to be retracting backwards, which is perfectly fine for me. I like that. No brakes. Diameter, it's kind of small. That is, especially for our Failliner here, looking pretty good. That's it seems reasonable again. Like I said, I like to do what looks right, not necessarily what works. I come back and fix all that stuff later. As the engineering folks like to say, details, details, details. That looks pretty good to me because we got a little bit of ground clearance here. Again, we have a tremendous advantage that our engines are high mounted, so we don't have to worry about them dragging, which is kind of nice. Okay, so next thing what I want to do is I want to quickly set them to be steering. I want to be able to drive this around. And if I scroll down here, you can actually define some of the details. This is the retraction. Here it is. All the way down. Let's see here. We can add a response. The response we want here is going to be yaw. It's for left and right. And of course, a yaw, we're going to set this to be, it's going to be pretty high, actually. I'm just trying to think about the math in the top of my head here. Let's do like a 30, I guess is what I want to call here. 30 looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and pop this into the sim real quick and see how it looks. Uh-oh. I see that one of my buttons is responsible. Oh, boy. Oh. So, unfortunately, in my infinite brilliance here, I attached the axis for nose wheel steering to retract. So, as you could see, oh, look at the sparks coming out of the back. So, we're going to have to fix that real quick. But it is kind of working, which is halfway through working, right? If you ever have issues, by the way, clicking on things, you can always actually just go find it over here. So I can go to landing gear. I had a feeling I was going to goof that one up, kind of a thing like that. I do that every single time. So this is the stuff for retraction. So if I actually close that there, that'll work. The actual stuff that you want for steering is at the bottom. So my incredible newbiness here accidentally put the retraction capability into the landing gear capability. Oops. Good enough. We fixed it. That's all that matters. All right, let's go ahead and deal with the landing gear or the rest of the body. Now, landing gear have to be about 6 inches behind our center of gravity here. And again, you can take a look here. We have a center of gravity. We have a center of pressure, which insanely are basically the same. Ha-ha! So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the plus key, put myself on symmetry mode. I'm going to do the ling mode. I'm going to go ahead and get myself some landing gear here. And obviously, we're going to make the world's ugliest landing gear. So what I'm going to do is grab these guys, and you can see where my center of gravity is roughly there. So I'm just going to click. Again, we're going for ugly here. We're not going for pretty. We're not going for capable. We're going for temporary because we want to be able to kind of test all of our stuff later on. So that looks terrible. which is what I expected. So a couple things is these are going to be the landing gear that have to do the work. So one of the things we'll do here is we can take a look. We have a lot of different wheel setups and travel setups here. We can actually change this. We can do something like that if we wanted. We can change the wheel angles and things like that if you want to have a lot of fun with it. What I see a lot of people will do is they'll go up to like 15 degrees like this, and they'll actually rotate the whole landing gear outwards. So like, see how it's got kind of like a crank to it? If I come over here to the rotation command, I can actually crank this 15 degrees out. So what I've done is I've actually given myself a little bit of stance there. Yeah, my plane is stanced. I like that. Let's go ahead and click that sucker again. All right, so we're going to hit that one. Up, up, up. Looks pretty good to me. And now we're just going to increase the height. I think up front we used a pretty lengthy height. It was like a 1 meter gear or something like that. So remember, these guys have to absorb the entire weight of the plane. This is only supposed to absorb the weight of the nose. So we're going to give myself a little bit of strength here as far as that goes. Okay, looks pretty good to me. Of course, I did a wheel angle of 16 degrees instead of 15 for some bizarre reason. I don't know if they do what that is. We're going to do no toe or anything like that. That's going to give us some issues. All right, so if we retract, as you observe, we retract backwards, which looks ugly, but it works. Like I said, we're not going for perfect here. We're going to clean all that stuff up later. One thing you can do, too, is if you go to retraction preview, like you can see, we can actually adjust the roll. So if we want to actually roll the gear a little bit, we can do that. We can also adjust the direction. So if you want to get really silly, you could actually retract inwards. You want to see the most uncomfortable thing you've ever seen an airplane wheel do? Oh, it twists. Oh, the pain. Oh, look at that. That's hilarious. All right, that looks pretty good to me. So one of the things that you're not going to get here is this guy's not going to copy that. So if I actually click over here, yeah, no, actually take it back. He's copied all my details. Of course, hopefully everything has been reversed. We're also going to set brakes. We're going to need some brakes. The brakes are going to be fairly strong. Yeah, they copied properly. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to crank up the size of the wheels because right now they're a little tiny. Let's see here. Wheel diameter. Am I being blind now? There we go. We want these bees to be chunky boys. There we go. Now that looks like those are actually way too big. One of the other things you got to do is got to kind of look at the side here and make sure the bottom is at the bottom. Remember, these are going to compress more because all the weight of the plane is going to be on them. So one of the things you can do is you can actually increase the travel a little bit, like give it like almost half a meter more. So when it compresses, it has some room to compress on those springs there. So when this whole thing goes on the ground, that's a technical term. It's I'm going to go ahead and shrink into this to give it a little bit of squiggle. So let's try that in the sim. Oh my gosh, look at this thing. Not bad. All the controls are moving. My flaps are moving. This is a happy day. And I see my little front wheels doing its thing there. You can see, oh, it's so nice. Retract. Crunk. Unreclunk. Wow, those are some really, really good. You can also see how delicately balanced I am. Down. Wait for the... Oh, that's stiff. We're going to have to loosen those springs up later, but not going to worry about that because now we have to worry about my least favorite part of this, which is actually making the wings work. Oh boy, here we go. But to make the wings work, of course, we need thrust. So one of the things that we can do is we can actually thicken the wing. And one of the cool parts here is if I actually click here, and if I were to press the tab key, do you notice how each one of these little balls here allows me to like click on it so I can make adjustments to the wing? Like you can see this one. You can actually change the thickness of the wing this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab the scale tool. And if I go like this, I'm actually making the wing thicker. You see I've made that wing significantly thicker there. So the reason I've done this is because I want to have, like I said, a little bit bigger of a wing to actually be able to store some fuel in it. So I'm going to go ahead and make this pretty substantially wider there. And don't panic too much here because a lot of people, like you'll see that and go, what have I done kind of a thing. And it's okay. It's okay. Like I said, enjoy the fun. Enjoy the fun. There we go. I need this to be a little bit chunkier of a wing. There we go. And it can definitely get thinner for me as we get away. But again, I don't want it to be too thin here. I want it to have some thickness. Probably something we should have done last time, but oh well. You can't win them all. Perfect. So let's go ahead and go back to movement mode. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. And I'm going to grab my wing here. I'll make sure I grab my original wing. Whoops. I've done that so many times. It's embarrassing. Oh my gosh. 0. Thank you. Make sure you grab the middle of the wing when you do that. Yeah, we're just going to lower it so it looks a little bit better. There we go. Now we have a wing that actually looks like it would come off an airplane. And, while we're doing that, I'm actually going to run up here real fast, too. And remember, we did this one first, so we have to actually use this one to do our shenanigans here. So let's go back to tab. We're going to go back to scale mode, which is in the bottom corner here. We're going to grab this, and we're not going for Chungus or anything like that, but we are looking for something that actually looks like it could support the lift of a plane. Go ahead now, come down here again. We're just going to... It just has to look right. I know that sounds like really precise engineering terminology here, but honestly, if it looks right, it probably will work. All right, but I don't want to be editing that node anymore. I just want to be editing this wing here. And yeah, you can see it's got this button here ready to go. Position mode. All right, it still thinks I'm on the mode for that one wing here. Okay, there we go, all fixed. Let's go grab that. We'll go back to position mode real quick. And we're just going to grab the whole wing. Got it. This time definitely, as I like to say. All right, there we go. Good enough. And yes, you can see this little guy right there. And I know that's going to annoy some people, so I'm going to press tab. And I'm just going to hide it. Nobody needs to know. If you didn't see it, I didn't see it. All right, let's go back to it. Time to do the fun part. And that is going to be to build some engines for this. Now, when I originally sat down and said, let's start building this thing, I said, okay, what's it going to be? Kind of a thing as far as picking out what engine and wings and all that other stuff. So let's see what we got for stats so far. We're 12.26 tons. That's not that heavy. Let's see, fuel weight 0. We'll fix that. Length is good. Height is good. And wing area is 180. It's pretty big. Wing loading right now is we're at 68 already for the wing loading. That's interesting. 68 is... that's a lot. That's a lot more than it sounds. So we're definitely going to need to be considering it. So let's design some engines for this thing. We're going to go jet engines today. We could do propellers, of course, but I'm not going to complicate things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on my airplane here. Now, there's a couple philosophical ways to attack this problem, and you understand why I do it the way I do it when you see me do it. Some people, I totally get this, will click on this thing. They'll press the plus button. They'll be like, all right, let's add myself a little wing nacelle here. So what you're going to do is you go to your lift. You sit here going, I just want to keep it simple. I'm going to grab a wing. You're going to come over here like this, and you're going to notice that the wing is sideways. You're like, oh, that's not that big a deal. So you go ahead and click like that. And next thing what you'll do is get symmetry's turned on, by the way. You'll grab this thing, and you'll be like, well, I've learned a lot today. Let's go ahead and do one of these. We'll do a trailing edge. We'll do a leading edge like this. That looks pretty groovy like that. You'll grab your rotation tool. You're going to grab it right there. You're going to take the whole thing, and you're going to crank it. You're going to crank it down 90 degrees like that. And it's starting to look like something. Again, we're going to keep the engines relatively close to the middle of the airplane. So you grab your little movement around tool. You click on this guy. You do one of these things like that. You bring it in nice and tight like that to the fuselage so that it's not going to be too whatever. You come in here, and then you start fiddling with this. You get it about roughly where you want it. You'd press the tab key, and you'd be like, all right, let's make this thing kind of look like it came off an airplane here. So you go like this. You kind of put it here. Then you grab this one, kind of go like that. Come in here. You grab this and kind of do one of these deals. And again, everything is pretty much what you're thinking it is. That actually looks terrible. When I say something looks terrible, you know it looks bad. And you end up with something that looks like that. Which, it's not terrible. Kind of looks like it would mount a jet engine pretty comfortably. Again, not going for perfection. And you're happy. So 25 minutes pass, a half an hour passes. You're kind of doing your thing. Everything's looking pretty good. Stab that in there a little bit more. You're happy, and you're like, you know what? It is time to put some edge on the wing. So you grab your rotation tool, you click on the wing, and you're like, all right, time to crank this thing down just a little bit so that it is a little bit more safe for flight here. So you grab this, and you go ahead and crank this to anhedral. We'll do 5 degrees of anhedral. And you know what just happened? Your beautiful engine arrangement with its beautiful pylon is now cranked down by 5 degrees. Whoopsies. So you said, shoot. So you go back, and again, there's no undo tool in this game. So you go like this, and you bring it back up. But then you grab this one by accident, and it gets messy. One of the safest things you can actually do here is instead of attaching it to the wing, is to attach it to the fuselage when you go to build it, and then drag it out to where you actually want your engine to be. That also means if you have to do a big change of your design, that's not going to cause as much trouble. For our purposes, of course, we're going to show you the long, scary, hard way to do it, and you'll kind of see why I do it the way that I normally do it, which again, I'd build it off the side and drag it over rather than try to build it like this. This is sketchy, to say the least, but for science, we're going to do it. So let's go ahead and put that anhedral back. Anhedral basically is going to create instability for us here. I'm going to put that 5 degrees back in here. And I'm also going to do that to my tail. Again, remember, we're working off this side of the tail here. So I'm going to go ahead just like that. And that's going to be that 5 degrees of anhedral. If I look at it, you can see it very distinctively now. That's going to actually make it easier to roll. You'll see what I mean. So what I have to do now, if you do choose to do it off the wing, if I come back to my original piece, I can now uncrank it by the 5 degrees that I just cranked it. So now if I look at it from the front, you can actually see that my nacelles there are actually still in the right spot. Good stuff, right? Good stuff. I like it. Let's do the engines. So the engines are going to go to the bottom of this guy right here. And of course, I'm going to press my little plus key here. I'm going to go to power, and we're going to grab ourselves a gas turbine. Now, of course, we could do like turbochargers and silly things like that, but not today. Boop. Aha, perfect. Yeah, no. So what I'm going to do now is I'll switch back to movement mode here. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit, and there's our jet. Good to go, right? No, not at all, actually. The problem we have here, of course, is this is going to be a very heavy component to the airplane, but not as heavy as the fuel, which is what we're going to have to install before we actually start going nuts on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my wing here and click in the middle, and I'm basically going to order this to hold some fuel in it. And the moment you add fuel to things, it gets very, very heavy very quickly. So I'm going to go to fuel tank. We're going to be doing Jet A, and you can see here it's going to add 2460 kilograms of fuel. Now, one of the cool things is if I come down here, you'll notice that the only fuel tank I have is this middle fuel tank. We actually don't have fuel in this part of the wing. That's a good thing, and that's a bad thing. But of course, like I said, you have to it's not good at updating itself sometimes. Like you can see both these sides are fuel, but you'll notice that this isn't a fuel tank, and this isn't a fuel tank. So what I'm actually going to do is here, come in here and actually set this to fuel tank, and that should be pretty good. Now that is too much fuel. Our empty fuel mat ratio is going to be too high. So you can see here our fuel fraction is 0.61. This does not need to be that high. That is unbelievably high. That's pretty high. Like I said, anything between 30 and 40%. Obviously, people are going to be like, but what about the Boeing 747? That could be like 60% fuel, in which case we're okay. This would be a very long-range aircraft. So that's a bit too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce the fill amount a little bit here. I'll bring it down to about 50%. So if I go back to my stats real quick, I can see my fuel fraction is chilling at about 0.5, that's enough. That'll get us there. But now we know the most important component, which is our weight. Our weight is 25 tons. Now, the reason that's really important to us is it allows us to do math. We know that we need to have enough thrust to get about a third of that. Now, that makes it much, much easier for us. Now, if you got a calculator handy, you can actually bang this out. So let's work it out. So we weigh about 36,000. So now we have two engines, and we know that we only need 1/3 of our thrust weight ratio, which gives us 59840 kilograms of thrust. Now, that's not really, we don't do that. That doesn't help us at all. So what we need to do is we need to multiply this by 9.8, which is gravity, giving us 58,000 newtons of thrust required total in order to make this possible. Actually, it's 58,000 per engine. Remember, we have two engines. That's a lot of thrust, but we're going to make it work. Now, right out of the gate here, our current thrust here, I'm not thrilled that this is not a high bypass fan, because it will be a high bypass fan here. So what I will do is I should come up here and I will set this to be a high bypass, because we need a little bit better fuel economy. Next thing I will do is I'll change the fan pressure ratio to 1. That's one of the quickest and easiest ways to kind of get better performance without stressing yourself out too much. So I can tell by my little absolute garbage here that I guess I could move it back a little bit. It is hideous. So maybe what I want to do actually is I want to shrink it this way a little bit. It's going to be terrible. I don't matter. Okay, so if we click on this thing right now, and we're just going to have it sort of hover sort of innocuously off the bottom of our little piece here, we know that we need to get, like I said, about 58,000 newtons per side in order to have enough thrust to get a thrust weight of about a third. So right now, before I even touch this thing, I can take a look real quickly over on my side, and I can just get a general feel for how much stuff it is by clicking the test run button. Now, here we are. I'm going to go ahead and click on the little play button here. And let's go ahead and crank that up. Let me turn my volume down so I can hear myself think real quickly here. Full throttle. And we're at 1400K. We're getting 167 exhaust. We're getting 34,000 newtons here. That's pretty good. I mean, our core diameter here is only, what is our fan rate? Our diameter is only 1 meter. Oh my gosh, that's tiny. So this is a very, very, very tiny turbofan here. Now, there's a bunch of different ways we can improve performance on this thing. The simplest way, of course, is to simply raise up the temperature or change my bypass ratio. Right now, I'm at a 5.68, which is actually a really, really good bypass ratio. And I mean, my overall pressure ratio is pretty high. So what I can do here is I can actually change this. Let me basically completely mute this. Let's go ahead and bring my pressure ratio up here. We'll go like to 2.5 here. And what is that going to do? It's going to bring my bypass ratio down just a tiny bit. So if I go up to 3 here, you can see it's going to bring my bypass ratio. It's actually pretty good. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to adjust my maximum temperature. Now, when you crank the temperature up, you're going to hurt your fuel economy, but you're also going to improve your thrust substantially. And you can see my new net thrust now is 50,000 newtons. Remember, we needed about 56,000 kilonewtons here. So we're actually really close. We basically just need to tweak it just a little bit in order to kind of take it to the next level. Now, there's a lot of different ways we could do this. One thing we could do, of course, is we could fiddle with our pressure ratios. And if I come in here and I crank that up, it's not going to make that much difference. If I come up here and bring this down, you just saw that massive boom out the back. If I go up to a 4, again, that's not really doing us that good of a job here. That gets us a 36 pressure ratio, which is way too high. We'll go to like a 31.5 here. So that's about 51,000 newtons that we're producing right now, which is not terrible. It definitely work. If we had a bigger fan, obviously we could get this thing going a little bit quicker. The other thing we could do too is we could adjust the tip Mach, but there's some problems with adjusting the tip Mach. If we crank this up, yeah, we're going to get more performance, but you're also probably going to observe that my N2 now is now pumping at Mach 1, which is much too fast. Yes, we're getting 52,000, but that's going to give us real big problems, especially when we get to altitude. Our specific fuel consumption still is a little not great, so we need to go with a bigger fan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause this real quickly so I can hear myself think again. And I'm going to go up to we'll go up to a 1.05 fan here, which is only a slightly larger fan. Let's go ahead and try that again. And let's see what that did for us. With a slightly bigger fan, obviously our bypass ratio goes up substantially here. So we can see at 1800K, our fuel economy went up a little bit. We're about 51,000, so we're getting pretty darn close now. So what I'll do now, of course, changing things like this don't do anything. Just change what the fan looks like. So you can fiddle with these all you want if you want a specific number. And obviously changing to different style of blades, none of that makes a difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reduce my high pressure ratio. That's a 9, a 10. Whoa, too much. 10, there we go. Let's see what that does for us. That's going to get us about 51 kilonewtons. That's not bad. So we got a little tiny again. This is not going to make that much of a difference for us. We could go with a bigger core. Going with a bigger core simply means changing your original diameter here. So if I go up to 0.55 here, of course I wanted 0.55. It gave me everything but 0.55. And bring our fan back down to our original diameter. What do we have here? We're at 62 right now. So we're actually pretty high. So let's go hit checkbox. I hate it when I do things like that. So let's bring our fan back to its 1.05 here. We'll go back to my test run so we can go take another look at it. We'll go ahead and run it. I love the whoosh. And we are at 60. Our fan is too big. Remember I told you we changed the core size just a little tiny bit, and now we're actually too powerful. So that's okay, because that means I can simply reduce the temperature a little bit, and I can actually get a little bit of our fuel economy back. I'm a little disappointed in our bypass ratio. This becomes a vicious cycle every time. It's coming down to 1700K here. That's pretty good to me. We can actually bring this up probably a little bit. Yeah, 4.6. We'll do 3. Yeah, that's pretty good. We'll leave it at 3. We'll come up to 1.1 on the pressure ratio here. Yeah, that was too much. 1.05. Again, I'm just fiddling a little bit here. Thruster weight is fantastic. This is a great engine. That's good. I like that. Okay, so now one of the things I really, really like to test. There's 2 bits here that you need to keep in mind. First of all, this thing has to work at idle, and one of the mistakes that I always made in the early days of playing this game was basically designing an engine that wouldn't work. You'd make these beautiful things that would just sort of tick along, and then they shut themselves off. That's good. So the other thing I want to do is I want to test what it's like at altitude. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up to 8,000 meters. And one of the things I noticed at 8,000 meters is we're at 23,000. And I also noticed my tip Mach is 0.99. That's way too high. So if I actually come in here and I dial in some speed, let's say we're traveling, we're designing for 0.8 here, you'll notice my tip Mach is chilling at 0.93, which is actually acceptable. But if we wanted to get this value a little bit better, what we could actually do is come over here and we could adjust this value so that my tip Mach is sitting right at 0.9. So it looks like to me 0.77 is going to do it. Yep, 0.9, perfect. So at 0.8 Mach at 8,000 meters, we're doing pretty okay. So let's jump up to 10,000 meters here. And we can see we're about 0.93, but our thrust weight is still 2 to 1, which is fantastic. You'll also notice my net thrust has dropped substantially because we're moving so darn fast here. There's a lot of drag to beat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my combustor, and I'm going to bring it up just a little bit, which is going to give us a higher normal thrust too, 12,000. Looks good, looks good, looks good. Wonderful. Let's go back to 0 and 0. And that is beautiful. Fantastic engine. That's great. Gives us exactly the thrust we wanted. You can see it came down a little bit. That's about what we want, a little less, but that's okay. The bypass is fine. The fuel economy is good. The tip Mach is good. Everything is basically, I'm not going to lie, it's basically a perfect engine for us. Nice. And again, we can go to greater detail on engines in another day. But that is our engine. It is not bad. You can see that it's not perfect or anything like that, but it's going to do the job just fine for us. So I'm happy about that. I like that. I like that. Can't wait to test it. All right. So the last thing we have to do here is we have to adjust the position of the wing here. Of course, we could do all the fly-by-wire, but that's really another video. And of course, we can put a nice little nacelle around this thing and make it all look pretty, but I'm not going to do that yet. What I want to check instead is I want to see where my center of gravity is. So if I were to grab this and pull this forward, I can see my center of gravity comes forward. This is my center of pressure, basically where my lift is coming from in the aircraft. And what you're probably observing is my center of lift is actually pretty far back. The reason it's pretty far back is because we have a tail. So now there's a couple different ways to sort of cheat the system here. Let me go ahead and say it before I break this. One method that I've seen people use is they'll actually remove the tail for the purposes of seeing where it actually goes. So if I come over here and go to aero mode, do you see how my center of lift shot forward here? See that, how the center of lift is basically at the back side. We actually need it to be right here where my mouse is. So we already know that my wing is actually too far back. So far forward, rather, we actually need to move it back about, I don't know, about 6 meters. So now if I press escape, as you can see, it removed my tail. So one of the reasons I warn people about that is you got to be very careful with that. Let's go ahead and put my tail back on. So we know that without the tail, my center of lift is at the back part of here, which is not far forward enough. So we can either move the wing backwards, or we can basically put the wing weight of the plane forwards. Again, we have two choices there. Bringing the weight of the plane forwards is going to be a little bit awkward because, again, there's so much weight back here already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my entire wing and I'm going to shift it backwards. Now, one of the nice things is that shift it backwards, we can actually get it so that it is closer to where our landing gear are. So I can put it about here. That looks pretty good to me. It's probably a little bit too far. So what I'm going to do real quickly is I'll save one more time. I'll go ahead and grab onto my tail. Again, this is just a dumb trick, but you can see now that my center of gravity and my center of pressure are basically right on top of each other, which is interesting. Like I said, it's going to give us a good, stable airplane. And stability is good, especially if we don't want to sit here and fiddle with it. All right, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to drop that down just a little. Oh my God, I grabbed the wrong one. Do you see? Do you see? Did you see me do that? Did you see me do that? Let's go ahead and load it back up. And we are ready to test. Da-da, bum, 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 bum. Let's give it a try and see what happens. All right, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. We are ready for test. Fuel tank is good, our controls are good, our nose wheel steering even works. I completely forget what the button for the brakes is, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. All right, you ready? Let's do it. Yeehaw! Oh, yes. So the reason it's doing that right now is because of the pressure ratio. If you remember, I have a very low bypass ratio. Or not low, but a low fan pressure ratio. That's what I'm looking for. All right, so we're going. We're going. There we go. Yeehaw! Da-do. Okay, not bad. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Let's go ahead and bring up the flaps here. Controls. Flaps are going to come up here. They just create and drag. In this game, they just create drag. Okay, I can work with this. I can work with this. Let's grab my controls here. Let's give myself a bunch of friendly pitch trim. You can see I need very little pitch trim, which is a good indicator that you did everything carefully and stably. Let's go jump back outside here. I'm not loving those engines right now. So their ratio is a little high. Nice. So we're doing about 115. We're doing about 0.34 here. So not bad, not bad. Like I said, nothing to write home about. So I'm getting about. It's accelerating though, which I'm not complaining about. And you can actually see it start to kind of pitch up on its own, which is kind of what I anticipated here. There we go. Go ahead and drag that like that. It's extremely stable. This is goofy. And the reason it's like that, like I said, my fan pressure ratio is so low. That's what does that. I'm not worried about it, though. My fuel consumption on this thing is squat. And you can see here, I've got about 3 hours at full throttle here. So one of the things I like to... This is so stable. I hate it. It doesn't feel right. It's like butter is the best way to describe it as far as stability goes. We did a fantastic job here. This is absolutely excellent. It is not pretty. Like I said, it is the Failliner. but it works, and it's I'm actually kind of proud of it. Not gonna lie. We could do some fly-by-wire stuff and all that other stuff later, but like I'm doing about 134 in my climb here, and like I said, this is all because it looked right. None of this is like carefully calculated out or anything logical like that. But one thing I do like to do is just kind of take a look at what's going on here. I'm not worried about that so much. Conditions, environment, there we go, flight. So let's see what we got here. 130, 135. None of these numbers are really helpful to me as a pilot, but whatever. Altitude, we're doing fine here. G, that looks good. Lift, plenty. Drag. Actually, drag's not bad. Thrust is about 65, so we're doing fine as far as that goes. Reference area, that looks good. Thrust, oh, it's only, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Remember how I said we'd aim for a third and we ended up with a quarter at basically after takeoff? Perfect. Drag's good. Roll. Oh my gosh, this is excellent. We did a really nice job on this. Like I am pleasantly surprised that this works as well as it does. But there's one thing we have to check, and this is always the embarrassing thing to do here. Whoa. We gotta land it. Don't sink. Terrain. 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 Don't sink. Don't sink. Pull up. Pull up. All right, let's get ourselves a little closer to the ground. All right, here we go. Here we go. So immediate problem is the fact that my windshield here blocks my view of the runway. The other problem I've detected is it does not produce enough drag, nearly enough drag during descent here. And I'm just kind of making my way down here, and I've got my flaps all the way down, and it's just not enough. I need to go like right up to flaps 40 or something like that. And a lot of you probably screaming at me going, why don't you just use third person? It's better. I fly in the real world. Like, I can't comprehend the possibility of flying a plane from outside unless it's like a model airplane. So a couple things I'm noticing right away is this thing is just, it's butter. Absolute butter, and it does not have nearly enough drag. And of course, I forgot what button you need to push to actually engage the brakes. So look at this thing. Look at this. Look at it. Look at it. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. It's just like, I feel like I'm flying on rails here. Like the lift in this is fabulous. It's absolutely so easy to handle here. There's some brakes in here. No, there's no brakes. Let's go ahead and kill the flaps. That was incredible. Okay, I'm actually pretty happy about this. So hopefully you enjoyed the series. I really, really had fun kind of making this thing. And as you can see, I overran the runway because it's not like I can get this thing to stop flying. I think I have to like shut my engines off or something. Like this just says no drag whatsoever. This is a very, very cool airplane here. Whoa! Got to goof off here. Oh no! I got ejected. So this has been a ton of fun to play with. I think what I'll do is one more video in this one after this one, and we're going to convert this into an attack plane. And because why not? Enjoy.